I came to the firm as an AV specialist. I'm a trained audio engineer. I did concerts and tours and things like that starting at about 13. That was how I spent time with my dad. So I had a very, very different background. To come in and sit down and have to teach an MBA how to get touchy-feely online has been a very, very interesting experience. But I think that's part of what made it work for me is because I wasn't so tied to their story and what they needed their story to be, that it was easier for me to adapt and understand where they were going and how to help them get there. For some reason, we have this story that the moment that you walk in the door of an organization, suddenly, you have to, wear your underwear on the outside and a cape. And, like you can't do anything wrong. Everything's got to be perfect and smiling and shining. And, you see that in some activity streams at certain organizations. You can tell how transparent they are because everything's awesome all the time. It's a lot simpler to craft something that feels good to them and hits a pain that they have. It allows you to actually see what their pains are in the first place. You don't walk in with a story about your own story about what's going on for them. But then it lets you get to the meat of the matter really quickly. So that was the biggest one for me.
Great.
Just kind of shut up and listen. Like the stickiest wicket of them all is getting people to understand that you're not, in my case, talking about putting software in, right? You're talking about putting a layer, kind of a filter. I always call it like scuba gear, right? Because it's like it shouldn't be something else I'm doing. It should just be something I'm breathing through all the time. You're putting this layer in place that's going to yield a certain degree of transparency naturally. And I've had this joke for the last couple of months where it reminds me of that scene in Star Wars with the droids. They're like, these are not the droids. This is not the transparency you're looking for, right? It feels like that's what the seniors are saying half the time. It's like, no, I just want the kids to go, yeah, awesome, And that's what social media is all about, right? Getting them to see that, getting them to get to a place where they understand that the organization needs changing is really challenging. It's finding those relevant, really, really, truly relevant stories to not just ROI and revenue and making the business better and improving efficiency, but to understand, listen, when you use a word like engagement, what do you mean? Right. What are you saying? I looked at a stat, somebody sent me a stat this morning, an example. They were asking me to define engagement for an ROI piece that they were doing. And they had given me an example of how they had measured it in the past. And they said, well, logged in and updated their profile the first time, and then logged in again. That means they're engaged. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? That's like the worst speed date in the world. I can't imagine what kind of engagement that is. But getting these guys to really kind of change the lens and look at that as a relationship. It's back to that humanity. So when I come into somebody's office and I say, let's talk about engagement. Let's talk about community management and why reward is important and why authenticity is important and transparency. And let's talk about each of the elements of those. People get very uncomfortable. People get very nervous quickly. So you have to be really tactful in how you do it. I've actually had one group recently kind of derail the conversation and talk about how they didn't like how one of the pages was more pink than any other color. Instead, because that was something they could control, that was something they could get their heads around and talk about instead of the fluffy stuff. How to change these guys' opinions, it really has to do with relevance. It has to do a lot with speaking their language, but not acquiescing. There's a balance. Understanding that they want ROI, pushing back and having them help you define what they mean by that. Right? So if they're saying that I wanted a return on investment, tell me what the return is going to be. My response is going to be, what are your goals? What are you really trying to accomplish? And let's define those. Because if you come back to me and you say, I want to connect and collaborate, I'm going to say, okay, what does that mean? And I'm going to keep on saying that, kindly and in a guided way. But I'm going to keep on taking you down that path until we have some understanding that's kind of irrefutable between the two of us, that Do you mean you want efficiency and we need to take this much percentage out of your email flow? Or do you mean that we want all of these disparate groups to be connected to one another in a meaningful way, and that meaning is that there is increased traffic around this particular topic, this particular tag, in this particular region? Or let's talk specifically about what you mean by that, and what your goals are for doing this in the first place. I think making people say things out loud themselves, making them, do you like that? It gets them to that place where they're kind of, they're doing a little guided self-awareness, exercise. And that tends to reveal the specifics that you can work around. It's such a common assumption for people to, you see it in the news all the time, don't you? It's like, oh, they're doing some terrible thing. And the reality is probably 9 times out of 10 that they're going, oh my God, crap, Fred, we forgot this thing, didn't we? Oh my God, And that's kind of how it works in a lot of ways. These organizations are incredibly savvy and incredibly well, organized in the way that they take care of their compliance and their governance and their their human resources and all those other very official, unhuman sounding things. But the reality is that they don't have all the answers. They're focused on the work that they're doing. They're trying to make more money as an organization. And their eyes aren't really open to a lot of this stuff. So it's you've got to be sensitive to that, and you've got to be willing to really walk in with a clean slate and hear what their story is before you make any assumptions about it, which is hard to do. It means you got to work on the fly in a lot of cases. But at least for the interaction part of it, as long as you've got your information at the ready, you know your story well. You got to know your story well. If this is just something you're kind of getting into because it sounds like fun, if you don't have the answers when that big guy goes, wait a minute, what about, then you're dead in the water. It's the same process that I follow when I'm trying to create an adoption strategy for somebody. Fix something. Fix something. Don't just come and say something's broken. It should be, you should come in taking something away and giving something back. It should always be that kind of, that exchange, right? So if you're coming in asking for something, you've got to give kind of irrefutable proof as to why it needs changing in the first place, how it's going to benefit things on the other side, and why this is the best approach to do it. And let me show you the homework that I've done. I've seen so many people come in and say, hey, I saw this one tool that I had this awesome experience with, and it totally changed my life, and we've got to use this. Well, mistake number one, why do you need the tool in the first place? What was the problem that you were trying to fix? Yes, it impacted you personally, and it was fantastic. But to sell just that tool and not really be coming in and saying, this is going to make our company better. And that brings up the whole ROI question and all of those other pieces again. But my answers to those are, again, why are you doing this in the first place? What's the relevance of it? I think in the next 5 years, it's going to be, we're going to have some awesome tools to play with that are going to change things. But in my crystal ball, from my perspective personally, I keep the tools out here. The people are the thing that tend to stay the same, and that part of it is it's still navigating fear. It's still getting people to open up a little bit and navigate some of that paradigm change that a lot of us are asking for. It started with open source. It continues with open data. We've got to keep on keeping on there. Make sure you know your story. Make sure you know your whole story, and ask yourself why you're doing it in the first place, what it is that you're trying to change. Get honest with yourself about it. If it's coming from a place of, this might be a little touchy-feely, but if it's coming from a place of you trying to fix some inadequacy within yourself, just think about what you're doing. Start. I look at these things as like layers of the onion, right? If it's the same process that I take with myself, with the community, with the organization, with the C-suites, the whole 9 yards. It's, why am I doing this? What's my goal? What is the impact of that goal going to be, right? What's the mission and vision, if you will, from here, from there, from there. If I'm right and true on those things, and they all make sense, there's a constant thread between the whole story, I stand a much higher chance of being able to get things done. Because I'll have that consistent, it's kind of like building a business case, right? You're building that consistent mission, vision, and story that's going to take you all the way to the end. Whenever something comes into question, you can point back and say, well, this is the business case. This is why we're doing it. Let's come back to this place and make the decision based on why we're doing it, not on because you like this tool, or not on because you agree with Fred or Bill more than you agree with me, right? It's making your story irrefutable and clear, having enough really solid data to back it up, and network like hell. Meet everybody that you can meet, get as many different perspectives as you could possibly get, and find the people who have the pain. If you can find a group or groups within your organization, groups are better, because then you have a whole set that you can present, where they're suffering from something and you have a really solid answer that's going to improve efficiency, and then you can build some stories to support that, whether it be through data or through anecdote. You've got a great opportunity there to put together a really solid story.